I woke up to the same grey light filtering through the curtains, the same hollow silence that had greeted me every morning for 3 years. The alarm clock on Sarah's side of the bed still blinked 12 o'clock because I'd never bothered to fix it after the power outage last spring. Her reading glasses sat on the nightstand, folded carefully, waiting for hands that would never return. I reached out to touch them, then pulled my hand back. This was the ritual. This was how mornings began in the house where love had died. My name is Michael Peterson, and I'm 37 years old, though I feel decades older. I teach high school English in a small town in Oregon, the kind of place where everyone knows your story, whether you want them to or not. They know about Sarah. They know about the accident 3 years ago, the rainy night, the 18-wheeler that crossed the median. They know I was supposed to be driving that night, but I'd had 2 glasses of wine at dinner, so she took the wheel. That detail, that tiny, terrible detail, is the thing that wakes me up at 3 in the morning, gasping for air. The house smells like coffee and dust. I make breakfast mechanically, the same way I've done everything since she died. Scrambled eggs that taste like cardboard. Toast that I barely chew. The kitchen radio plays some cheerful morning show, and I switch it off immediately. I can't stand other people's happiness. It feels like an insult, a reminder of everything I lost and everything I decided I'd never risk again. At school, I go through the motions. My students probably think I'm just another burned-out teacher, and maybe they're right. I teach Hemingway and Fitzgerald, and occasionally catch a glimpse of my reflection in the classroom window. A hollow-eyed man in a wrinkled shirt who stopped caring about most things 3 Octobers ago. My colleague Patricia sometimes leaves casseroles on my desk with notes that say things like, "You need to eat," or "We're here if you need to talk." I thank her politely and throw most of it away. I don't want their pity. I don't want their concern. I just want to be left alone with my ghosts. I made myself a promise after Sarah died. Never again. Never let anyone close enough to hurt like this. Love is a luxury I can no longer afford, a door I've nailed shut and boarded over. On our anniversary, I still visit her grave and tell her about my day, about the mundane details of a life that continues without her. I tell her I'm fine, even though we both know it's a lie. Then I drive home, pour myself a glass of the whiskey she hated, and try to remember what it felt like to be whole. It was a Tuesday in November when everything changed, the kind of cold, drizzly afternoon that makes you want to stay inside. But I had to pick up groceries after work. The parking lot at Save Mart was nearly empty, puddles reflecting the pale grey sky. I was loading bags into my trunk when I heard it, a sound that stopped me cold. Crying. Not just ordinary crying, but the desperate, terrified sobs of children. I turned around and saw them huddled behind a rusted-out sedan 3 spaces away. 2 little girls, maybe 5 or 6 years old, identical in every way. Matching pink jackets soaked through with rain, dark hair plastered to their faces, holding on to each other like they were the only solid thing in the universe. Their eyes were wide and red-rimmed, and they were shaking. My first instinct was to walk away, to mind my own business, to go home and pour that whiskey and pretend I hadn't seen anything. But something in those terrified faces held me in place. Something that felt like the universe itself was forcing me to make a choice. "Hey," I said, approaching slowly with my hands visible, the way you'd approach a frightened animal. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The girls looked at each other, communicating in that silent twin language. Then the one on the left spoke. Her voice was small and trembling. "Mommy said to wait here. She said she'd come back, but that was a long time ago." "A long time," the other one echoed, and my heart cracked a little. I knelt down in the rain, ignoring the cold water seeping through my jeans. "How long ago was that?" "The sun was up high," the first girl said, pointing at the grey sky where the sun should have been. "Now it's almost dark. 5, maybe 6 hours, left in a parking lot. I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. What kind of person abandons children like this? I pulled out my phone, ready to call the police, when the second girl grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Please don't," she whispered. "They'll separate us. They always say they might separate us." "Always?" I asked. "This has happened before." They nodded in unison, and I saw something in their eyes that I recognized. The same hollow fear I saw in my own reflection every morning. The fear of being alone. The fear of losing the only person who matters. "What are your names?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm Emma," said the girl who had grabbed my wrist. "This is Lily. We're twins." "I can see that," I said, managing a small smile. "I'm Michael. Listen, we need to figure out what's happening here. You can't stay in a parking lot all night." "Are you going to call the police?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I should have said yes. That was the responsible thing to do, the right thing to do. But looking at their faces, thinking about them being separated, being processed through a system that might not understand that twins need to stay together, I hesitated. And in that hesitation, everything that came after became inevitable. "Not yet," I heard myself say. "First, let's get you somewhere warm and dry. Then we'll figure out what to do." I don't know what possessed me to bring them home. Maybe it was the way they looked at me with such desperate hope. Maybe it was the way Emma held Lily's hand, protective and fierce. Maybe it was because, for the first time in 3 years, something other than grief was calling the shots. Whatever the reason, I found myself driving 2 shivering, frightened children to the house I'd shared with Sarah, the house that had become a mausoleum. They sat in the back seat, quiet and watchful, and I caught glimpses of them in the rear-view mirror. They were beautiful children, despite the dirt and the tear-stained faces. Something about them seemed familiar, though I couldn't place why. They had Sarah's eyes, I realized with a jolt. That same deep brown with flecks of gold, but that was impossible. That was just my grief-addled brain making connections that didn't exist. When we got to the house, I gave them towels and found some old t-shirts that could work as makeshift pajamas. They were tiny in my clothes, drowning in fabric, but at least they were dry. I made grilled cheese sandwiches, the only thing I knew how to cook besides scrambled eggs, and watched them eat with the focused intensity of truly hungry children. "When did you eat last?" I asked. "Yesterday," Emma said. "Mommy didn't have money for food yesterday. She said today she would get money, and then she'd come back for us." "But she didn't come back," Lily added quietly. "Maybe she's not coming back ever." The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, so resigned, broke something open in my chest. These children had already learned one of life's cruelest lessons. The people who are supposed to love you can disappear. "We'll figure this out," I promised, though I had no idea how. "For tonight you're safe here. You can sleep in the guest room." The guest room that Sarah had always said we'd turn into a nursery someday. The room that still smelled faintly of her perfume, Chanel No. 5, because some of her things were still stored in the closet. I hadn't been able to bring myself to go through them to decide what to keep and what to donate. Now I was grateful for that paralysis. At least the room had clean sheets and pillows. I tucked them into the bed, these strange children who had appeared in my life like characters from a story I didn't know I was reading. They held hands even in sleep, their fingers interlocked, and I felt something shift inside me. Some locked door beginning to crack open. I should have called Child Protective Services immediately. I should have done everything by the book. But I didn't. Instead, I sat in the living room with Sarah's picture in my hands, asking her what I was supposed to do. The photograph showed her laughing at our wedding, her head thrown back, eyes shining with joy. She would have known what to do. She always knew what to do. "I'm not ready for this," I whispered to the photograph. "I'm not ready to care about anyone again." But ready or not, something had already begun. I woke up the next morning to the smell of something burning. I bolted out of bed and ran to the kitchen, where I found Emma and Lily standing on chairs they'd dragged to the stove, attempting to make pancakes. The kitchen was a disaster. Flour everywhere, eggshells in the batter, smoke rising from the pan. "What are you doing?" I asked, more sharply than I intended. They both jumped and Lily started to cry. "We wanted to make you breakfast," Emma said, her voice small and defensive, "to say thank you for letting us stay." My anger dissolved immediately. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not mad. I'm not used to having people in the house." I turned off the stove and surveyed the damage. "Let's try this together, okay?" We made terrible pancakes, lumpy and burned and oddly shaped, but the girls ate them like they were gourmet cuisine. Watching them, I felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. Not quite happiness, but maybe the memory of what happiness used to feel like. "So," I said, trying to sound casual, "tell me more about your mom. What's her name?" The girls exchanged another one of those looks. "Jennifer," Emma finally said. "Jennifer Brooks. But sometimes she calls herself other names." "Other names?" "When we move," Lily explained. "We move a lot. Mommy says it's because people don't understand us." Red flags were going up in my mind, but I kept my voice calm. "And your dad, where is he?" "We don't have a dad," Emma said. "Just Mommy. But Mommy said, she said once that our dad was a hero, that he saved people, but then she got sad and wouldn't talk about it anymore." After breakfast, I called the school and told them I had a family emergency. It wasn't entirely a lie. Then I started making calls to the police, to social services, trying to find out what had happened to Jennifer Brooks. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Jennifer Brooks had a record: drug possession, petty theft, prostitution. She'd lost custody of the twins twice before, but somehow always got them back. And 3 days ago, she'd been arrested again. She was currently in county jail, unable to make bail, and according to the police, she'd never mentioned having children with her when she was picked up. "The girls," I said to the social worker on the phone. "What happens to them now?" "We'll send someone to collect them," she said briskly. "They'll go into emergency foster care while we sort things out." "And will they be kept together?" A pause. "We try, but we can't guarantee it. Twin placements can be difficult." I looked across the room at Emma and Lily, who were sitting on the couch, looking at one of Sarah's old photo albums they'd found. They were pointing at pictures and whispering to each other, and something about the scene felt right, in a way nothing had felt right in 3 years. "What if I took them?" I heard myself say. "Temporarily, until we figure out what's happening with their mother." Another pause, longer this time. "Mr. Peterson, are you a licensed foster parent?" "No, but..." "Then I'm afraid it's not that simple. We have procedures. Background checks, home studies. It can take months. But they're here now. They're safe. They're together." "I understand, but we can't just..." She sighed. "Look, I'll send someone over this afternoon to do a preliminary assessment, but I can't make any promises. The girls will likely need to come into state custody while we process everything." After I hung up, I sat very still, trying to understand what was happening to me. 3 days ago, I'd been a ghost, walking through a life I no longer wanted. Now I was fighting to keep 2 children I'd known for less than 24 hours. It made no sense. It was reckless and irrational, and exactly the kind of attachment I'd sworn never to make again. Emma appeared at my elbow, making me jump. "Are they going to take us away?" she asked. Those brown eyes, so much like Sarah's, were filled with understanding beyond her years. I wanted to lie. I wanted to promise that everything would be okay. But I'd learned that promises were dangerous things, easily broken. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I'm going to try to make sure you stay together. That's what matters most, right? That you have each other?" She nodded slowly. then did something unexpected. She climbed into my lap and put her small arms around my neck. "You smell like sad," she whispered, "but also like safe." I didn't know what to say to that. I just held her, this tiny stranger who somehow saw right through all my defenses and felt the ice around my heart begin to crack. The social worker who came that afternoon was a woman named Angela Rodriguez, in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She interviewed the girls separately, then together, then asked me a barrage of questions about my background, my living situation, my motivations. "Why do you want to do this, Mr. Peterson?" she asked, sitting across from me at my kitchen table while the girls played in the other room. "You understand that foster care is a commitment. These girls have trauma. They've been abandoned, neglected. They're going to need stability, therapy, patience. And from what I understand, you're still processing your own trauma." "You mean my wife?" I said flatly. "Yes. I'm sorry for your loss. But grief is complicated, and taking on 2 children in crisis while you're still grieving, that's a recipe for disaster." "Maybe," I admitted. "Or maybe it's exactly what I need, what we all need." She studied me for a long moment. "I'll be honest with you. Your situation is unusual. You're single, you're not a licensed foster parent, and you've had these children less than 24 hours. Under normal circumstances, I'd take them into state custody right now." My heart sank. But they're bonded to you already, I can see it. And they're terrified of being separated. Emma told me that you promised to keep them together." She gave me a look. "Did you promise that?" I said I'd try. "Then let's try. I'm going to recommend a temporary emergency placement with you while we expedite your foster care certification. You'll need to attend training, pass background checks, have home inspections, and you'll need to commit to family therapy for all 3 of you. This isn't going to be easy, Mr. Peterson." "Nothing worth doing ever is," I said, and realized I was quoting something Sarah used to say. Over the next few weeks, my life transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The quiet house that had been my prison became filled with sounds, laughter, arguments, the patter of small feet running down hallways. Emma and Lily attended the elementary school 3 blocks away, and I adjusted my teaching schedule to accommodate drop-offs and pickups. Patricia, my colleague, was shocked when I asked her for casserole recipes. "I need to learn how to cook actual meals," I explained, and she actually hugged me, tears in her eyes. The girls brought chaos and color into my monochrome existence. They left toys everywhere, asked endless questions, demanded bedtime stories. They fought over silly things. Who got the blue cup? Who sat by the window in the car? Who got to choose the TV show? And slowly, almost imperceptibly, they began to heal. The hollow fear in their eyes started to fade, replaced by something that looked almost like happiness. But they also challenged me in ways I wasn't prepared for. Emma had nightmares. Terrible, screaming nightmares where she called for her mother and woke up sobbing. Lily went silent sometimes, retreating into herself in a way that reminded me too much of my own coping mechanisms. They asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Why did our mommy leave us? Will you leave us too? What happens if nobody wants us? And then there were the strange little moments that made me wonder about connections I couldn't quite see. The way they gravitated to Sarah's things, her books, her music, her photograph on the mantel. The way Emma hummed a specific melody that Sarah used to sing. The way Lily organized her dolls in the exact same way Sarah had organized her shoes, by color and size. One evening, about a month after they'd arrived, I found them in the guest room, going through boxes in the closet. Boxes I'd never opened, boxes full of Sarah's things. My first reaction was anger. Those were private. Those were mine. But then I saw what they were looking at. It was Sarah's journal, the one she'd kept sporadically throughout our marriage. And they were reading an entry from 6 years ago, before we'd even met the girls, before any of this made sense. I dreamed about twin girls last night, Sarah had written in her elegant script. They had my eyes, Michael's smile. We were in a park, and they were laughing, and I've never felt such joy. When I woke up, I cried because I wanted it to be real so badly. Michael says we have time, that we don't need to rush into having children, but what if we're meant to? What if they're out there somewhere, waiting for us? I sat down hard on the floor, the journal shaking in my hands. It was impossible. It was a coincidence. It had to be, but the girls were looking at me with those eyes, Sarah's eyes, and something clicked into place in my mind, some puzzle piece I'd been avoiding. "Can I tell you something?" Emma asked quietly. "Something Mommy told us once when she was being nice?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "She said we were special, that our dad was a teacher who helped people understand stories, and our other mom was an angel who watched over us. She said they couldn't keep us, but they wanted to so much. She said we were loved before we were even born." The room spun. "Emma, what are you saying? Mommy showed us papers once, adoption papers. Your name was on them, and a lady named Sarah." I couldn't breathe. 6 years ago, Sarah and I had started the adoption process. We'd been matched with a pregnant woman, Jennifer Brooks, who wanted to give her babies to a good home. We'd been so excited, so hopeful. We'd started setting up the nursery, buying baby clothes, imagining our future. And then, at the last minute, Jennifer had changed her mind. She'd decided to keep the babies. We'd been devastated, but we'd respected her choice. We'd moved on, or tried to. Except she hadn't really kept them. She'd struggled and failed and put them through hell, and somehow, impossibly, they'd found their way back to the parents who had wanted them from the beginning. "You're ours," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "You were always ours." The girls came to me then, wrapping their small arms around me, and I held them like I should have been holding them for 6 years. All the grief and rage and loneliness that had consumed me since Sarah died transformed in that moment into something else. Not healing, not yet, but the beginning of it. The possibility of it. "Does this mean you're our dad?" Lily asked, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "If you want me to be," I said, "if you'll have me. What about our other mom, the angel?" I looked at Sarah's photograph on the wall, and I swear I saw her smiling. "She's still here," I said. "She's always been here, and she loved you before she ever met you. We both did." The legal process of adoption was long and complicated. Jennifer Brooks eventually signed away her parental rights from prison, acknowledging that she couldn't give the girls the life they deserved. There were court dates, evaluations, more therapy sessions than I could count, but through it all, we were together. We were a family. The girls started calling me Dad naturally, without fanfare, and every time they said it, my heart hurt and healed simultaneously. I put their drawings on the refrigerator next to Sarah's old grocery lists. I learned to braid hair and pack school lunches and check for monsters under the bed. I read them stories every night, and sometimes they'd ask me to tell them about Sarah, about the mom they'd never met, but who had loved them anyway. "She would have been so good at this," I told them one night, "so much better than me. She would have known exactly what to say when you're sad, exactly how to make you laugh." "But you know too," Emma said simply. "You're learning." And I was. I was learning that love doesn't replace love, it adds to it. That grief and joy can coexist. That the heart has infinite capacity if you're brave enough to let it expand. Sarah's loss would always be part of me, a scar I'd carry forever. But these girls, our girls, were teaching me that scars don't mean you're broken. They mean you survived. On the anniversary of Sarah's death, which had always been the darkest day of my year, we went to her grave together. I'd been dreading it, afraid it would hurt too much, afraid the girls wouldn't understand. But they surprised me, as they always did. They brought flowers they'd picked from our garden and drawings they'd made at school. "Hi, Mom," Emma said to the headstone. "We're your daughters. We finally found Dad." "He was lost," Lily added. "But we found him, just like he found us." I knelt between them, one hand on each small back, and spoke to Sarah for the first time in months. "I'm okay," I told her. "We're okay. I know you sent them to me. I know this was your plan all along, even when I couldn't see it. Thank you. Thank you for loving me enough to make sure I wouldn't be alone forever." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, and I chose to believe it was her answering, telling me to be happy, telling me I'd done enough grieving, telling me it was time to live again. 6 months after the girls walked into my life in that rainy parking lot, the adoption was finalized. We celebrated with cake and balloons and invited everyone who'd helped us along the way, Angela, Patricia, even some of the teachers from the girls' school. It was small and chaotic and perfect. The girls wore matching dresses and kept giggling nervously, and when the judge signed the papers and declared us a forever family, they both cried, and so did I. "You know what this means?" I told them as we drove home that evening. "It means you're stuck with me. No returns, no exchanges." "Good," Emma said firmly, "because we're keeping you." "Forever and ever," Lily agreed. That night, after I tucked them in and kissed their foreheads and turned off the light, I stood in the doorway watching them sleep. They still held hands, still needed that connection to feel safe, but now they had more than just each other. They had a home. They had a dad who loved them more than he'd ever thought possible. They had a mom watching over them from somewhere beyond the stars. And I had them. 2 tiny miracles who'd walked into my life at exactly the moment I'd given up on miracles, who'd taken my closed, broken heart and pried it open with their small, persistent hands, who'd taught me that the only way to honor the love you've lost is to keep loving. I thought I was saving them that day in the parking lot, but the truth is, they saved me. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with us on this journey. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even in our darkest moments, hope can find us in unexpected ways, please consider subscribing to this channel. Every week, we share real stories about real people finding their way through grief, loss, and hardship to something better. Stories about second chances and found families and the courage it takes to love again. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community. Because here's what I've learned. We all need reminders that even when life breaks us, we can be put back together. Sometimes stronger than before. Sometimes in ways we never imagined. And nobody should have to learn that lesson alone. Subscribe, and let's keep finding hope together.